I parked my 2011 Honda Accord between a black Porsche Cayenne and a pearl-white Tesla Model S. Their doors clicked shut with practiced arrogance. Mine closed without a sound. Just like Menno noise. No performance. Just a quiet presence in a world that had once tried to erase me. The last time I was here, in the grand Hamilton estate, I was a trembling girl of 24, cradling my newborn daughter and a bottle of cheap whiskey I kept hidden in my purse. I remember Sylvia Hamilton's cold eyes as she watched me stumble through the marble entryway. She didn't speak. She didn't have to. Her silence screamed, louder than any insult. It said, "You're a burden, a disappointment, a stain on our name." That night, I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I simply left, clutching Sophie to my chest and a single suitcase that smelled of mildew and desperation. The world outside was no friendlier. I spent years in that darkness rock bottom, had a taste of stale beer and unwashed blankets. I thought I would drown in it. When Sophie was 3, I got my first real glimpse of rock bottom, waking up on a bathroom floor with a bottle in one hand and her tiny fingers shaking my shoulder. That was the day I stopped drinking. I poured every last drop down the drain and promised Sophie I'd never let her see me like that again. But promise don't pay rent. I worked every job I could find, cleaning houses, delivering newspapers, anything to keep food on our table. Every night. After Sophie fell asleep in our cramped studio apartment, I taught myself how to code on a borrowed laptop. I told myself, one day, I'll build a life that no one can take away from us. Tonight, as I stepped out of the car and into the cold evening air, I felt that promise burning bright inside me. My hair was pinned back in a simple bun. My navy dress pressed and clean. No designer label. No borrowed Yevelry. Just me, Elena Porter, 34. Mother. Survivor. And builder of a world no one here could ever imagine. The grand doors of the Hamilton estate were open, the chandeliers casting golden light over laughter and fine wine. As I walked inside, I wasn't the girl they remembered, and they wouldn't be ready for the woman I had become. The rain was coming down hard the night I found a room for Sophie and me. It was barely more than a closet in a run-down boarding house, thin walls, a window that wouldn't close, and a single flickering bulb overhead. Sophie was only 4 then, clutching her stuffed bunny like a lifeline. I watched her sleep on that stained futon, her little face turned to the wall to escape the draft. That was when I knew. I couldn't let this be our story. I had lost too much already, my husband in that accident, my dignity in the bottle, then my family when they shut the door in my face. But I wouldn't lose her. The rain was coming down hard the night I found a room for Sophie and me. But years before that night, the rain had already come for us. My husband, Mark, died in a car crash on a rainy Tuesday morning. One moment he was there warm, alive, laughing as he kissed Sophie goodbye before work. The next, he was gone. A truck ran a red light, and my world went dark. The police came to my door, their voices solemn, their eyes full of pity I didn't want. Mark was gone, and I was alone. I thought I could keep it together for Sophie. But grief doesn't ask for permission. I lost my job within 6 months, too many days calling in sick. Too many nights I didn't come home. I told myself it was just a drink to take the edge off, just something to help me sleep. But the bottles piled up like a barricade around my heart, and I couldn't see my way out. The day they fired me, I didn't even cry. I just walked home in the rain, soaked and numb, with no idea how I'd pay the rent. Sophie was 3 then, too young to understand why Mama couldn't get out of bed some days, why there was always a half-empty bottle on the table. It was Sylvia Hamilton, me mother-in-law, who finally had enough. She came to the door one afternoon, her lips pressed tight as she looked at me. "You're a disgrace," she said. her voice as cold as the rain. "You're not fit to raise my granddaughter." Then she told me to leave. No, goodbye. No second chances. Just a slammed door and a single suitcase in my hand. That night, I found a room in a rundown boarding house. It was barely more than a closet-thin walls. A window that wouldn't close. And a single flickering bulb overhead. Sophie clutched her stuffed bunny like a lifeline as she slept on the stained futon. Her small body curled against the cold. Her breath slow and even. Watching her, I realized that no matter how far I'd fallen, I couldn't let it end here. I had already lost too much, my husband. My job. My place in the world. But I wouldn't lose her. The next morning, I went out looking for work. No experience. No references, just desperation. I washed dishes in diners. Scrubbed floors in office buildings. Carried boxes in warehouses. Anything to keep Sophie fed. To keep her warm. Nights were the hardest. After Sophie fell asleep, the quiet would creep in like a fog, wrapping around me, whispering all the things I'd failed at. But even then, there was one promise I wouldn't let go of. I would never let Sophie see me like that again. I poured every last bottle down the drain, bought a second-hand laptop with the tips I saved, and taught myself to code. Some nights, Sophie would wake up and find me hunched over that old screen, eyes red and shoulders slumped. She would crawl into my lap, wrap her arms around my neck, and whisper, "I love you, Mama." And that was enough to keep me moving one small step at a time. I still remember the first time I sat down with that old laptop. The keys stuck. The screen flickered. And it smelled faintly of burnt plastic. But it was mine. In that moment, it was the only thing in the world I truly owned. I would stay up all night, long after Sophie had fallen asleep, my fingers moving over the keys in the dark. Some nights, I'd be too exhausted to keep my eyes open, but I'd force myself to keep typing one line of code, one small step away from the past. The first job I got was data entry for a tiny cybersecurity startup that operated out of a basement in the city. I took the bus across town every morning, leaving Sophie with a kind neighbor who watched her for a few dollars a day. It wasn't glamorous, but it was a chance. The pay was just enough to cover the rent and keep Sophie in fresh clothes. But I didn't care about the money. I cared about the feeling, the rush of writing something that worked. Even if it was just a line of code that no one would ever see. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something, even if no one else saw it. I saw it. On my lunch breaks, I would watch free webinars on network security. I learned about VPNs and firewalls, about how data can be both armor and target. At night, I practiced, testing my scripts until the laptop overheated and shut itself down. I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I remember one night, the power went out in the boarding house. I sat there in the dark, listening to the rain pound on the roof, feeling the panic rise in my chest. But then I looked over at Sophie, fast asleep under a patchwork quilt. And I knew I was never going back. No matter what, I would never go back to the woman I used to be. The more I learned, the more I realized that I wasn't just coding. I was rewriting my life. Each script was a small victory. Each error a lesson I would not forget. And with every line of code, every late night, I was building something no one could take away from me. It wasn't easy. The job was temporary. The hours were long. And there were nights I thought I would break under the weight of it all. But every morning, when I woke up and saw Sophie's face, I knew why I was doing it. And that was enough to keep me going. I knew I couldn't keep working for someone else forever. The jobs were just enough to get by. But I wanted more for Sophie. I wanted to build something that was ours, something no one could take away. So I started Arcadia Security in the corner of our cramped apartment. Just me, that old laptop, and Sophie's quiet breathing in the next room. At first, it was small, just me fixing small network glitches for local shops, coding until dawn for tiny paychecks. But it was a start. I didn't have investors. No big names behind me. Just a mother's resolve. I pitched my services to anyone who would listen. Cold calls, cold emails, even handwritten notes slipped under doors. I heard no so many times I stopped counting. But every rejection felt like a step closer to the one yes that would change everything. Finally, it came. A small defense subcontractor gave me a chance-owned contract. Barely enough to cover rent. But it was a start. I poured every dollar back into Arcadia, taking no salary, living on instant coffee and determination. Sophie didn't understand the numbers, but she knew Mama was fighting for something bigger than a paycheck. When I told her Arcadia was mine, she smiled and said, "Mama's company." That was all I needed. The world didn't see me yet, but I was ready to prove I didn't need their approval. Arcadia was just a seed, but I would make it grow. A year passed. Arcadia wasn't just surviving, it was growing. Each contract was a battle. But each victory meant another step away from the nights I spent, wondering if I was enough. I didn't have a fancy office. I worked from the kitchen table, surrounded by Sophie's crayons and empty coffee mugs. I didn't wear a tailored suit. Just clean jeans and a determination that didn't need a label. Then one evening, I met someone who changed everything. At a cybersecurity conference, I crossed paths with Celestia, former NSA analyst turned angel investor. She saw something in me that no one else did. She didn't ask about my past. She only wanted to know what I planned to build next. She gave me $200. 000, and an old wristwatch, its leather band worn. Its face simple but strong. "You'll need this," she said. "Time is everything." I wore it every day since that investment was the catalyst. Arcadia took on bigger contracts, small government agencies, then federal departments. I hired my first real team, 3 coders, 2 security analysts, all of us driven by something more than paychecks. I didn't tell Sophie about the money or the deals. She only knew that Mama was working late but always came home. She would wait for me at the window, her small hand pressed to the glass. And every night, when I finally closed the laptop, she would be there to say, "I'm proud of you, Mama." 3 years after that first contract, Arcadia was no longer a side project, it was my life's work. We grew from that corner of my apartment to a shared office in a rundown building. It didn't matter how it looked, it was ours. Our contracts expanded. Hospitals, city governments, small defense contractors. Each job taught me more than any classroom ever could. Each setback tested my resolve and reminded me why I started. There were times I wanted to quit, late nights when I stared at a blank screen, feeling like an imposter. But then I'd see the wristwatch on my wrist and remember, I wasn't just building a business. I was proving to Sophie, and to myself, that no one's opinion could define me. I kept the letter Sylvia had written, me, the one that said I wasn't fit to carry the Hamilton name. I didn't keep it for revenge. I kept it as a reminder that no matter what they said, I was still here, still fighting, still growing. By the time Arcadia secured its first federal contract, we had moved to a real office. Sophie came with me to see it, a modest space, but bright and full of promise. She sat at my desk, feet dangling off the chair, and asked, "Is this your kingdom, Mama?" I smiled and said, "No, sweetheart, it's ours." I hadn't stepped foot in the Hamilton estate for 9 years, but when the invitation came, a simple card, no warmth in its words, I felt something shift inside me. Sophie was 12 now, tall and graceful like her father. She asked if she could come, and I hesitated. But then I realized she had every right to see this part of her story. 2. We drove up in my old Honda, parking between cars worth more than I'd made in my first 5 years of Arcadia. Their doors closed with arrogance, mine closed with quiet certainty. As we entered, I felt the weight of those marble halls, the judgment in every glance. Sylvia Hamilton sat at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her eyes still as cold as the night she cast me out. Malcolm, Lydia, Ethan, they were all there. Laughter polished to hide the edge. They didn't expect me. They didn't expect the woman who had built a company from nothing, the mother who refused to be erased. They expected the girl they had discarded a shadow at the edge of their perfect world. But I wasn't her anymore. The dinner was as elegant as ever crystal glasses, silver cutlery, veal plated like a painting. But the conversations were the same old dance: who bought what, who married whom, who was winning in court. Sylvia's smile was polite when she turned to me. Still in technology. Elena. She didn't say Arcadia. She didn't say my name, like it meant anything. I nodded. Yes. Still building. Malcolm raised his glass, smirking. To those who chase little dreams. I didn't lift mine. I let the silence answer for me. It was then that Jillian, my assistant, appeared at the doorway dressed in black, a quiet shadow in the golden light. She leaned down beside me and whispered, "Miss Porter, the jet is ready. The pilots need final confirmation for Tokyo." A fork clattered to the plate. Conversations died mid-sentence. I thanked Jillian softly, folding my napkin with calm precision. "Tell them I'll be there shortly." I felt every pair of eyes on me questions. Disbelief. Maybe even fear. They had spent years dismissing me, erasing me. And now, in that moment, they couldn't ignore me any longer. I didn't explain. I didn't apologize. I just looked at Sophie, her eyes wide, a smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. She knew, and for the first time, I let them see who I really was. The silence that followed was heavier than any insult. Malcolm tried to recover first, clearing his throat. "So, what exactly is Arcadia doing now?" "Still, those small contracts." I didn't look at him. I pulled out my phone and opened the news app, sliding it across the table. There it was. Arcadia Security awarded $900 million Homeland Security contract me, face beneath the headline. Ethan leaned forward, his lips moving as he read the numbers. Lydia dropped her fork. Sylvia's hand hovered in the air, trembling slightly as she stared at the screen. Malcolm let out a tight laugh. "That's impressive. If it's real?" He tilted my head. "You think Bloomberg inflates federal contracts?" No one answered. I could feel the weight of their disbelief crack around them like ice breaking on a frozen lake. I didn't need to shout or argue. My work spoke for itself. Sylvia's voice was thin when she finally said, "Why didn't you tell us?" I met her eyes calmly. Would it have mattered? The air in the room felt sharp, every breath heavy. Sophie reached for my hand under the table, her small fingers warm and certain. In that touch, I felt everything: my past, my struggle, my promise to her. I stood up slowly, folding my napkin one last time. "I have a flight to catch," I said. "Arcadia doesn't wait, and neither do I." As I turned to leave, I heard Malcolm start to protest. Ethan began to stammer about potential investments. Sylvia reached for my arm, but I stepped away before she could touch me. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. I didn't look back as I left the Hamilton estate. The cold night air was sharp, but it tasted like freedom. The car was waiting, engine humming softly. Sophie slipped in beside me, her eyes bright. She didn't say anything, she didn't have to. In her silence, I heard every word I'd fought so hard to say. As we drove away, the estate faded in the distance columns and chandeliers. Laughter polished like glass. But I didn't carry any of that with me. I carried only what mattered, Sophie's hand in mine, and the quiet certainty that I'd built something no one could ever take away. The next morning, the messages started. A LinkedIn request from Lydia, a voicemail from Malcolm, a long email from Ethan, offering strategic partnerships, and from Sylvia, a handwritten note delivered by courier-pressed paper. Full of regret. It said, "We're proud of you." I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded every message to Jillian with 2 words, block list. That night, I sent a small box to the Hamilton estate. Inside, I placed Sylvia's old letter, the one that told me I didn't belong, and a photograph of their dining room window from the outside. My seat at the table empty. No noche. No explanation. Just a silent reminder. I was there. You just didn't see me. Some of us were never invited to the table. But that doesn't mean we didn't belong. We find our own tables. Our own kingdoms. And when the world finally sees us, it's already too late. Sophie fell asleep on my shoulder as the city lights blurred by. I looked at the wristwatch Celeste had given Mite's hand, still ticking. Still mina. Time had never been on my side. But it didn't matter. I had made my own rules. I closed my eyes, holding Sophie close. Whatever came next, we would face it together. Remember this, no one else can tell you who you are. No one else can decide your worth or measure your dreams. You are the only one who can define what you stand for, and what you're willing to fight for. If you've ever felt like an outsider, like your place at the table was never truly yours, know that you're not alone. The world may try to silence you, to write you off as unworthy, but you hold the power to prove them wrong. Like Elena, you don't need anyone's permission. You don't need their approval. You only need the courage to take the first step, and the resolve to keep going even when the path is darkest. So let this story remind you. You're not here to blend in. You're here to stand out. You're not here to beg for a seat. You're here to build your own table. And if you've already started, don't stop. Don't settle. Because the world doesn't get to define you, you do. If you felt something in this story, if it lit a spark in you, drop a comment below and tell us. What table will you build? Hit like, share this video, and subscribe for more stories of quiet power and fierce determination. Until next time, stand strong. Stand proud. This is your moment.